I want you to find a hotel that's been built in the last year. And here's what I want you to do. And to the woman, I want you to go to the hotel, and I want you, before you enter the hotel room, I want you to strip naked in the hall. And then you're going to go into the room and you're going to shower. And there you can, order Instacart or DoorDash or whatever, or a friend can deliver brand new packaged clothing to you, and you will start your life over.
If you're a healthcare provider tired of just treating symptoms and ready to dig deeper into the root causes of health issues, the Vibrant Wellness Podcast is for you. With insider tips, expert interviews, and the latest in biotech research, this podcast will take your patient care to the next level. All right, ladies and gentlemen, hold on to your stethoscopes because we've got a guest on the show today who is anything but conventional. My name is Jen Rivas. I'm joined by my absolutely amazing co-host, Dr. Emmy Brown. Emmy, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you, Jen?
Awesome. Thank you. I am so excited because Dr. Jack Wolfson is a renowned cardiologist, author, and speaker who is not afraid to think outside the box when it comes to healthcare. In his everyday practice and his best-selling book, The Paleo Cardiologist, he's not afraid to challenge the status quo and provide cutting-edge insights that can help people live healthier, more fulfilling lives. Dr. Wolfson has been featured in major media outlets such as CNN, Fox News, and USA Today, just to name a few. So grab a green juice, kick back, and get ready to have your mind blown by Dr. Jack Wolfson, the cardiologist who's shaking up the medical world one beat at a time. Welcome, Dr. Jack.
Thank you for the wonderful intro. Very clever. One beat at a time. I love it. And people grabbing their stethoscope. Just some fantastic visuals and analogies to introduce me. So again, I appreciate it. Great to be here. And of course, with you and Dr. Emmy. Thank you.
So, Dr. Wolfson, I'm going to jump in and kick it off. So let's jump right in and discuss some staggering facts to warm us up surrounding cardiovascular disease. Many of us are aware that, of course, heart disease is the #1 cause of death worldwide. But to really put things into perspective, according to the CDC, in the year 2020, about 2 in deaths from coronary heart disease occurred in adults less than 65 years old. That's way too young in my book. And one person dies every 34 seconds in the United States from heart disease. These trends persist despite common knowledge of these numbers and increasing interest in health, wellness, and preventive medicine. Obviously, something needs to change, and there's some confusion as to how to go about it. Dr. Wolfson, why do you think we're stuck in this loop, even with more focus on lifestyle and dietary modification?
Well, I think ultimately the loop, I guess I'll get right into it. The loop is controlled by pharmaceutical companies. It's just very clear. Pharmaceutical industry runs every facet of medicine. They run medical training. They run the medical schools. They run the professional societies that the doctors are members of afterwards. It's really from the day #1 in medical school. It's all about labeling a person with a certain condition. And that condition could be high blood pressure, cholesterol, Parkinson's, cancer, labeling a person with a condition and then applying a set of pharmaceuticals and procedures to try and deal with that. And ultimately, I know you and I and everybody at Vibrant and a lot of the people who we communicate with and all the holistic practitioners, that's what, we all understand that there is a time and a place for pharmaceuticals and surgeries, but it should be at the end of the game versus the beginning. And the beginning is all about essentially what I would call a triumvirate of eat well, live well, think well. And as we eat well, live well, and think well, that's our best strategy, moving forward. But we get a lot of, against us because the pharmaceutical industry, they're so strong. They dominate all media platforms. They dominate all governments. And again, going into the medical training and the societies, we got a big road ahead against us, but I guess what we have on our side is the truth, and the truth will prevail.
Love that. Well, now just to give us a little bit more of the backstory, Dr. Wolfson, you've claimed to be somewhat of a radical when it comes to your opinions, views, and even strategies on how to prevent and treat heart disease. Correct me if my timeline's off, but I believe in 2012 you shifted from being a respected leader in more of the conventional medicine and to opening your own practice, Wolfson Integrative Cardiology. Can you walk us through that transition and your reasons ultimately behind it?
Yeah, it all really goes back to late 2004. And I serendipitously was introduced to a young woman who is a doctor of chiropractic, a DC. And I guess, I tell the story, very well in my book. And anytime someone is asked, but I guess to kind of cut to the chase, she, very quickly said, "You need to become a DC." And I said, "Wait a second. I just finished up 10 years of medical training. I'm 3 years on the job as a cardiologist, making a lot of money as a cardiologist. I assume I'm helping a lot of people." And she said, and I said, "Now you want me to become a chiropractor?" And she said, "No, not DC doctor of chiropractic, but DC doctor of cause." And at that time, like
Mm.
you said, I was the director of cardiology, the chairman of medicine, of internal medicine at a large hospital in Phoenix. I was the director of cardiac rehabilitation. In 2011, I would be chosen by my peers as one of Phoenix, Arizona's top doctors, which, I mean, again, is a pretty large, honorary, position, to be selected to. But ultimately, after meeting my wife and her open up my eyes to all things health and wellness, to her pulling me out of the medical matrix and really the matrix in general, the big matrix and the medical matrix, she opened up my eyes to health and wellness. And what I saw so much sickness around me, what she had to say made perfect sense. And I started to change. And in 2012, I would start my company, Wolfson Integrative Cardiology, which is now Natural Heart Doctor. And it gets me on the line with phenomenal, thought leaders like the both of you. And it's a very exciting time. Again, it's, because I think what's interesting about me certainly is that I was born into the medical model with my father as a cardiologist, and just seeing everything from that side, and then kind of seeing this natural holistic side. And like we alluded to before, understanding that there is a time and a place for emergency medicine and trauma medicine,
Mm.
but for everything else, for prevention or recovery after an emergency or traumatic experience, the medical community has
Mm.
nothing. They have got nothing. There are things in their toolbox, such as statin drugs or blood pressure drugs or anticoagulants such as aspirin, or even stronger anticoagulants like Eliquis and Pradaxa and Xarelto and all these new pharmaceuticals. They're barely above worthless in some cases, and in some cases they are outright detrimental to the health. And this is not conjecture. This is not conspiracy talking. This is really in the medical literature. Again, if you look at the data on statin drugs, the number one revenue generating class of drugs of all time, it is a joke.
Mm.
It is a sorry state of
Mm.
affairs that so many hundreds of billions of dollars have been spent on that particular class of drugs with little to no benefit. And in some studies, actually showing deleterious effects, including excess mortality or death. So, but again, it's just,
Mm.
and the pharmaceutical industry, is so strong, right now. Real quickly, I just want to segue and say I saw a movie, and I'm forgetting the title of it, but I saw the movie, a few months ago, and the premise was about how this particular group of people were um, drug running. They were drug running from Mexico to the United States. And one of the comments was, "Okay, well, you got to be careful with that, because again, like the drug runners, the Mexican cartels and stuff like that, the government, like that's like serious business." And the guy's like, "No,
Mm.
that's petty crime compared to what these people are doing. These people are bringing in
Mm.
pharmaceuticals across the border. And when you do that, now you're messing with the pharma cartel, which is much, much, much more powerful than any of these drug cartels."
Wow. Pharma cartel. I might quote you on that. But that's incredible. It's staggering.
It's really unfortunate, because it's just the millions of people who are suffering because of this methodology. And it's not because the doctors are not intelligent people. These are very, very intelligent people. But, listen, right
Mm.
now we're recording on, Riverside, the Riverside platform. And if you asked me, if someone said, "Hey, listen, Jack, I want you to, uh, uh, program something on Riverside," I would have no clue how to do that. And somebody may look at me and say, "Wow, you are a total idiot. You have no idea what you're doing." And I would say, "It's not that I'm an idiot. It's not that I'm not intelligent. I've never been trained in this particular
Yep.
format." So ultimately, the
Exactly.
doctors at the Mayo Clinic and the Cleveland Clinic, and you can name any prestigious institution, it's not that they're not intelligent. It's just from day one, they've been trained in the pharmaceutical surgical paradigm. And the good news is, I think the public is really demanding a lot more. The generation
Mhm.
of 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, we saw the sickness in the older people. We saw our parents and grandparents swallowing handfuls of pharmaceuticals, and we saw how sick they were, and we saw how they're in their 60s and 70s and 80s and they're surviving, they're not thriving. We saw that, and we don't want that. And I think that's really
Mm.
going to be, the next thing is, because it's not going to come from the medical doctors down. It's going to have to come from the public up. And the public up is going to have to demand better from their doctors. And if the doctors don't change, well, they're going to be out of business and they're going to be, listening to people like us, which is perfectly fine.
Sure, makes sense. And you're talking about people being interested in an alternative way of going about healing. And so I want to flip the script a little bit. You hit the nail on the head when you mentioned in a past interview how many people rather take an affordable pharmaceutical, right? If we're talking about the financial side of things, rather than tackle the diet, lifestyle, stress, and toxic load. This is obviously a challenge for both the clinician and the patient. So, how do you suggest practitioners motivate their patients to put in the work versus taking the pill, so to speak, for the best long term outcomes?
I think
Where do
it's,
we start?
yeah, no, it's a great question. And I would just say it's really just about highlighting the truth to them. It's just about saying to them, um, not only, yes, you have a choice of which way you could go on this, but the problem is their choice is a failure. Their choice is the sickness model. Their choice has an average life expectancy of 78. Their choice says you're going to be on several different pharmaceuticals, with a multitude of side effects. Our side is vitality. Our side is clarity. Our side is longevity. So we can say to someone, well, if you would like to live until you're 78 years of age and you would like to live going to and from the medical doctor's office and in and out of the hospital and on several pharmaceuticals, well, that is what the average is. And that is what you will likely get should you choose that option. But if you want to choose
Mm.
Mother Nature, if you want to choose common sense and therefore choose health and wellness, this is what we have to offer. But I guess ours is more difficult, certainly in the short term, to say, well,
Mm.
you have to eat all these organic foods and you have to go to sleep on time and get adequate sunshine and you have to go to a holistic dentist and you have to be under chiropractic care and you got to avoid environmental toxins. You have to avoid mold mycotoxins and test your home. And you got to you got to look at all these different environmental toxins and you're looking at leaky gut and you're looking at stool testing and you're paying in many cases out of pocket for the most advanced testing in the world that insurance is not going to cover in a lot of situations. And then you're going to take these handful of supplements. And also we got these biohacking strategies for you, right? We want you to buy a sauna and we want you to jump into a cold river and we want you to, get IV therapy. We want you to do hyperbaric and ozone and red light. We want you to do all these different things. Most people are going to say, not, I don't want to say most people, but a lot of people are going to say, no, thank you. They're going to say,
Yeah.
give me the statin drug. Give me the blood pressure drug. The problem is though, is that that's a death sentence. And
Mm.
it seems like the easy way out. It seems like the cheaper way out, but you are going to be on the way out is what you're going to be. And that's what we stand for. So hopefully we find enough people who want to gravitate towards the truth. I certainly could have stayed in the medical matrix and I made a very, very, very comfortable living as a hospital-based cardiologist, guaranteed income, uh, again, prestige and acknowledgments in my local societies. And again, just being kind of part of the system. But, I elected out of that for many, many, many different reasons and ultimately to do the right thing. But, but I think it's good. I think it's good that we have an alternative to mainstream medical. And I think, again, we see this every single day. More and more people are gravitating towards us. And the more people like us that keep shouting it from the rooftops, the truth is going to prevail.
Mhm.
Sure. Yeah. And I love how you put it in terms of average. If we're talking to our patients, hey, this is the average. I can't say where you're going to fall on the spectrum, but this is the average. So these are the rates, take your chances. It's kind of a gamble and it's a really investment up front. And I love how you
Mm.
list off all the things we can do holistically. And to me, that sounds like a gift. I get so excited, but I think a lot of people, maybe not a lot of people, I think people are coming around, as you said, Dr. Wolfson, but to some, it sounds like a chore list, I think up front.
Hmm.
But really framing it in terms of these things are an investment in your health. It's really foundational, and we've really gotten far away from that type of living, unfortunately, which is leading to a lot of disease. So, and again, I'm a realistic optimist. So I'd love to know your take on where we're moving forward in terms of medical training. So I do see some allopathic medical schools now, University of California, Irvine, Mayo Clinic. They're starting to incorporate integrative care. They're offering acupuncture, nutrition, counseling, meditation, etc. Do you feel like we're moving in the right direction in terms of professional medical training and the curriculum? To provide natural medicine options, or what do we need to see more of in the medical school curriculums?
Yeah, I think we're moving a little bit, but it's certainly very, very, very slow. And I think one thing we need to be leery of is again the holistic practitioner schools are actually veering more medical, which I think is probably a much bigger
Mm.
problem that we're going to encounter going forward. So it really takes the free mind to be able to, get your way through this and become a good quality holistic practitioner. The medical model is highly, highly, highly predicated, obviously, on sickness. So therefore, you're not going to get much of the medical training programs or, even I know places like Cleveland Clinic, Mayo Clinic, they've tried integrative medical departments, but nobody wants to work there because the truly integrative, doctors who they understand that it's just not in the interest of these institutions. Cleveland Clinic, Mayo
Hmm.
Clinic, they build cancer centers, they build heart disease centers. These are not where they're focused on acupuncture and eating organic. It's just I don't think that the reality is going to come from there. But I do also want to circle back, real quick and talk about the expense. Yeah, there could be upfront expense, but when we make you a healthier person by our methodologies, that could make you a better everything, right? That makes you a better worker. You're able to work smarter. You're able to work longer. You're able to be more productive and therefore generate more revenue. When you're not going to the doctor's office, when you're not winding up in the hospital, having your appendix taken out or your gallbladder taken out or under cancer treatment, you can just do so much more to be financially productive, but also, of course, spiritually, productive, in your social life and your personal life. And what is that worth? And then I guess I also want to just kind of mention a perfect example of a patient who I saw recently who's 53 years old with ischemic cardiomyopathy. So this gentleman has had a massive heart attack. He has congestive heart failure. He's on many different pharmaceuticals, and he has an implanted cardiac defibrillator. So a shock box that would bring his heart, shock his heart to life should his heart stop. And I told him, your average life expectancy from this moment in the medical world is 4 years. 4 years is the average. You're in your early 50s. On average, you will live another 4 years. That's not my data. That's the data in mainstream medical journals. So I said, that's what the medical side has to offer. I think on the natural side, the holistic side, we have the 100-year heart. If you do what we say to do and you follow that and you believe it and you embrace it, you will have longevity. You will have the 100-year heart. We know we can give you that chance. We know what your life expectancy is on the other side. We know, for example, if you take a statin drug for primary prevention, so you're 58 years old and you've been told you have high cholesterol and to go on a statin drug. We know that at best that it decreases your chances of having a heart attack, stroke, or dying by a tiny amount. So say, for example, at best, according to their literature, the averages, we can reduce your heart attack risk in the next year from 1.5% to 1.35%. 1.5 to 1.35. That's the best they could do. And that's all they know. So again, they're going to say that that's an incredible benefit. But don't we want to tell people, we don't want you to be in the 1.5% risk of heart attack. We don't want you to be in the 1.35% risk of heart attack. We want you to be in the 0% heart attack risk. We know they can't offer that. And I believe that we do.
Great point. Again, helpful to point out those figures for people to wrap their minds around this. And I want to transition a little bit in terms of labs so we can, again, put this into context. And I've heard you mention the concept of a cave person cholesterol. And I love that because I do wonder what would a cave person, caveman, cave woman, cave whatever, cave person cholesterol look like in terms of the average in the Paleolithic era, which got me thinking beyond cave person cholesterol and a little bit more about in depth labs, such as inflammatory and metabolic markers, because we can talk about cholesterol all day. But in terms of labs that you like to look at in addition to cholesterol, inflammatory metabolic markers, what do you think that they would have looked like for that cave person compared to today in terms of preventing and monitoring cardiovascular disease?
Yeah, I guess when you talk about cave person and with the climate the way that it is today with pronouns and stuff like that, I don't even. I guess maybe let's just move on from that and go on from that discussion. But listen, I think ultimately when you give the body what it needs, you take away what it doesn't. The labs look good. Genetically, I want to say we're perfect. Genetically, we are perfect. I'm not a believer in genetic abnormalities. Now, certainly, if you take man-made toxins and you put it over on someone's genetics, you can have certain issues. But the problem is the man-made toxins. And in that particular arena, I will blame it all on the men. I will say that they are man-made toxins, not person-made toxins. With these man-made toxins, again, on the genetics, that's where the problem, lies in. And when we, again, eat well, live well, think well, that's where we're going to get the best outcomes. But ultimately, it's that eat well, live well, think well, but then test, don't guess. I love that also inside of our system where test, don't guess. A lot of people listening, they're taking a lot of vitamins, taking a lot of minerals. Are they working? How do we know? Well, that's where the test, don't guess comes in. And we use the most advanced testing in the world in our model at Natural Heart Doctor and Vibrant America, excuse me, Vibrant Wellness is a large part of that methodology where we can really get detailed information. So we talk about the caveman cholesterol. Well, cholesterol is a very poor marker of cardiac health and total body health, and we've known this really since the 1970s that we've known this. And when people have typical testing these days, the 1970s testing, but we can get so much more detailed, so much more nuanced, so much more in depth with distinct, different testing, systems. Like you mentioned, lipids are not very important to me at all. What's much more important are the markers of inflammation. If someone's inflamed, if someone has evidence of oxidative stress, we need to figure out why, because they are at markedly increased risk and it's a much more predictive a marker for all disease than abnormal lipids. But even I get emails all the time or comments on social media. My total cholesterol is 260. The doctor wants to put me on statin drugs. The total 60 number means 260 number means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. Now I know it means something in the medical world because that's their trigger to write for statin drugs. But we want to get so much more detailed information. What is their ApoB, ApoA? What is their ratio? What is their LP little a? What are the inflammatory markers? We can get so much more in depth that really provides tremendously useful information. So if someone has an elevated ApoB A ratio, well, they're at significantly elevated risk than someone who has a low ApoB A ratio, yet their total cholesterol could be exactly the same. So one person with a total cholesterol of 240 may be in perfect shape. Another person may be in horrible shape, but you would never know unless you get a lot more detailed information. And this whole thing about, bad cholesterol, good cholesterol, the LDLs are bad, HDLs are good. That's all pharmaceutical company speak. It gets so much more detailed, than that. And unfortunately, and sadly, and you guys see this as well, the medical doctors, they just don't care. They just, and a lot of, the situation was about 5-10 years ago where they were essentially saying, don't even check lipid levels. Don't even check cholesterol levels. Just
Yes.
understand that most people are better off on statin drugs and get them onto the highest dose that they can tolerate. And it's
Mm.
just sad because, again, when you inhibit the HMG-CoA reductase enzyme with a pharmaceutical, or interestingly, with certain mold mycotoxins, for example, citrinin, of which the first statin drug was based on. So when you inhibit that particular enzyme, you're inhibiting the body's natural production and utilization of that enzyme. And so downstream from that, cholesterol obviously is very important and other things that cholesterol does, but also in there are things like CoQ10, heme A, dolichol, prenylated
Mm.
proteins, a lot of things that we interfere with when we start on statin drugs. So Uh, yeah, I mean, ultimately, their methodology is a failure, and it's our job to expose it.
Mm. And so there's a whole cascade of events, as you mentioned, when you get started on a medication that inhibits CoQ10, and then there's a whole other slew of things that I don't think that many patients are aware of, unfortunately. So I'm glad you touched on that. And what about, so we are talking about prevention here and there, and we have mentioned nutrition, but I want to get really specific in terms of pastured, ethically raised sources of red meat. Of course, red meat is controversial. And we talk about prevention. Okay, we're a lot more open minded. But what about in patients with a history of cardiovascular disease? Someone with a history of MI. I know a lot of conventional docs would say saturated fat, no go. They don't care if it's grass fed. What do you say? I would love to know your take on that.
I mean, to me, again, everybody should be on the same diet, and to me, that is, you can call it paleo, you can call it hunter gatherer, you can call it ancestral, you can call it caveman, cave person, you can call it whatever you want. It's just Mother Nature. It's just common sense. It's what our ancestors have been eating since the dawn of human existence. Why try and reinvent the wheel? Why do us humans have to argue about this? Do we have to tell a lion or a tiger what to eat? They just know what to eat. Do we have to tell a cow that a cow
Mhm.
should be eating grass? Do we have to tell a bison that it should be eating grass? So ultimately, I think that animal foods and seafood are the most nutrient dense. It's not that I think, I mean, they just are. They are the most nutrient dense things in the entire world. And a lot of commentary these days in the carnivore space, for example, is on the deleterious effects of eating plants, where plants can actually be harmful because the plants produce certain molecules that dissuade you from consuming them. Like broccoli doesn't exist and say, Dr. Emmy, I want you to eat me because I like you and I want to help you. No, broccoli wants to survive on its own. And
Yep.
in that sense, it's just a matter of understanding that the animal products actually do not have any of those defenses once you kill the animal.
Mhm.
So, for example, my sons and I, we were on a buffalo bison harvest this past weekend. So we were at a bison ranch, big acreage, essentially wild, buffalo. There's no tame buffalo. These are wild buffalo that are fenced in, and they're eating their native food, which is grass and things that they would encounter on the prairie and on the tundra of the Great Plains. And we harvested that animal, and it was killed with a gun. So now it doesn't have any defenses, and therefore it is sacrificed for us to be able to enjoy the bison liver. And there is no healthier food on the planet than liver. There's nothing that's more nutrient dense, packed with all the vitamins, all the minerals in their perfect
Mhm.
amounts, in perfect ability to be assimilated for human consumption. And we carved up that animal right there, along with 20 other people, and we enjoyed fresh heart and liver and spleen and lung and testicle. So that's what we did. And it's so the whole thing about saturated fat, that's all just government propaganda in bed with the food industry to
Mhm.
vilify saturated fat, to vilify animal products so they can sell us the Midwest corn, soy, wheat and the like. And this is all well documented in many, many, many different books. But again, it's just common sense. Our ancestors did not eat corn, wheat, soy, barley, and rice. Our ancestors were hunter gatherers. You can take that to today's TV shows: Alone, Naked and Afraid, Survivor. If you are a vegan who shows up on the show, either you quickly quit or you quickly stop being a vegan because you will die without boxes of oatmeal and bags of walnuts. You become a hunter gatherer,
Mhm.
and that's how you survive. That's documented by Weston A. Price, a dentist from the 1920s who traveled around the world. The explorers, Magellan, Captain Cook, they documented this. And even in modern day paleo peoples, again, the foods that they are eating. So it's very clear that's the way that we should be eating. Everything else is just, propaganda influenced by pharmaceutical industries in bed with, with government and with food, big food, big ag, big food, big pharma,
Mhm.
government. It all goes in together, and the smart person will wake up.
I love the way you put that. I mean, you've opened my eyes to some things I truly never thought of. But speaking of our ancestors, in your book and on previous interviews, and by the way, I am a huge Tom Bilyeu fan. I absolutely enjoyed watching that interview you had with him. But I've heard you share that we all need to embrace the sun, something that our ancestors got a lot of. So we can all agree vitamin D is a huge benefit. But what other benefits does the sun supply for us? And perhaps what suggestions do you have for providers whose patients are you? They can't get outside, they're just not in a climate where they get adequate sun exposure? How would you handle
Yeah,
that?
Tom Bilyeu needs to get in the sun, is what my experience was with dealing with Tom Bilyeu and that interview. And it was just so interesting because, again, like his platform is so huge, and so many millions of people saw that, and just the commentary on there, it really just kind of it's inspirational, I think, for all of us in this holistic space to understand. And I know that the two of you know this. I mean, so many arrows and rocks are slung at people like us, for speaking the truth and disrupting the common paradigm and narrative of what people see. And, we have to stay strong in our beliefs, understand that we're right, and move forward with that. And that kind of takes us into the sunshine story when someone like me stands up there and like, we need sun. But,
Hmm.
when you say that, you have a lot of medical doctors and other people who listen to those medical doctors of like, what are you talking about? The sun causes cancer, blah, blah, blah. And, nothing could be further from the truth. The sun prevents cancer. The sun prevents cancer, doesn't cause cancer, it prevents cancer. So, what do we mean by that? Well, and again, it just goes back to a common sense approach. Our ancestors, like all plants, all animals, were out in the sun. They were out in the sun all day. It is only the current human who sits inside, and we're the ones who are sick. The plants and the animals who are outside, they thrive. We can barely survive. So, what is the purpose of the skin? Well, the skin, yes, yeah, I mean, certainly vitamin D is part of the story, as you mentioned, and it's a very, very, very important part of the story when we get vitamin D from food and from sun, not necessarily from supplements. But the vitamin D, it comes from our skin. And what is the purpose of our skin? It's not just for aesthetics. It's not just holding together a bag of bones. It is a solar panel. It's a solar panel built to collect light. Think about the solar panel on your roof, on your neighbor's roof, out in the desert somewhere. Those are light collectors to produce energy. Our skin and our eyeballs are light collectors to produce energy, provide information to the body. Now, one of those measurements that could be done and should be done is vitamin D. Other thing that the sun does is that it increases nitric oxide. Nitric oxide opens up blood vessels, anti-inflammatory, anti-platelet, anticoagulant. When we are in the sun, the exposure from the sun also helps to build melatonin, which when we're supposed to go to sleep, gets released. And that melatonin controls all of our other hormones. All bodily functions are somehow impacted by melatonin. So when we're sleeping and we're cleansing out our liver and our kidneys and our body and our brain and all these things that happen while we sleep versus all these things that happen while we're awake. Again, it's all predicated on those two things, that sleep and sun cycle. And it's just, again, it's just common sense. It's just common sense of what humans have done since the dawn of human existence. And, ultimately, to your point, what do people do when they live, like a lot of my patients I see from Seattle, Portland, all over Canada, my hometown to Chicago, Minnesota, upstate New York, Norway, Russia. What do I do? Dr. Wolfson, what do I do? When I speak at all these places, got people in the audience, what do I do? And I say, move. I mean, move. Move to an island, move to southern Mexico, move to Costa Rica, move to the Caribbean, move near the equator. That's strategy number one. Okay, I can't move. I love where I live. I love where I live. My family's here. My whole thing is here. My job's here. I don't want to move. Okay, well then take a lot of vacations. Well, vacations are tough. It's hard for me to take a vacation. I got this, I got that. Okay, fine. Then get a vitamin D lamp, which is a UVB lamp, and eat a lot of animal and seafood products that are naturally high in vitamin D. Plants do not have any vitamin D. So we're not going to get it from the plant world. We got to get it from the animal world. And that's what we do to get the vitamin. Now that helps with the vitamin D side, but it's not going to help with nitric oxide production, necessarily melatonin production. Our ancestors came from the equator. I don't make the rules. It's just where they're from. They're from the Middle East. They're from Northern Africa. That's just where they're from. The healthiest people live closest to the equator, in just about every study. All the blue zones and stuff like that, saved for a couple different places where in those areas, for example, Iceland is one of those blue zones, but they eat a phenomenal amount of seafood. And then number two, their environment is very clean. Number three, their water is very rich in sulfur. And sulfur helps to create glutathione, other detoxifiers in the body, helps to make our blood vessels slick And that's what, one of the benefits of living there. But again, it's just common sense stuff that they just don't teach us in medical school. In medical school, the doctors who train us, they watch TV like everybody else does, and it's like, oh, sun cancer, skin cancer is on the rise, so make sure you put on your toxic, lotion. And um,
Hmm.
it's sad. It really is sad. And then finally, we'll wrap it up. I mean, there are plenty of studies that show that people who work outdoors have the lowest risk of melanoma. So take that to the bank.
Fascinating.
Interesting.
Okay. And so and you touch on so many benefits of sunshine. So I'm wondering about benefits beyond just lowered blood pressure, et cetera. So when we're really thriving, not just surviving, we feel better than ever, right? So do you ever hear patients report pleasant surprises or improvements beyond just lowered BP, better sleep? For example, do they come to you and say, I wasn't expecting, I don't know, better libido or XYZ, cleared up skin? I'd love to know what you hear where people are just really thrilled when they come back.
Well, all those things are definitely true, and including libido and including erectile function, because as you are increasing nitric oxide production, yeah, you're going to have better blood flow. I mean, that's what Viagra is. It's a nitric oxide booster. So if you can do it naturally
Mhm.
from the sun, that's going to be good. The sun just releases all of these different endorphins and relaxing hormones for us as well. And therefore, when we are relaxed and these endorphins are running around, and when we're in a relaxed state, libido is much better. When we're under stress and our body thinks it's getting chased by a tiger, there's no libido. When you're getting chased by a tiger, there's only survival. Uh, uh,
Right.
in that sense, you can imagine our caveman ancestor who's running from the tiger, and if he were to stop to peek at something of sexual interest, he would get killed, and therefore he's no longer here. So evolution got rid of people like that. So ultimately, stress, vacation, relaxation, self-care, it's going to make everything better, and all these different pleasant surprises. One thing is, again, is that cholesterol is coursing through the skin, and as the sun hits it, it turns it into vitamin D. So in that scenario, vitamin D levels go up and cholesterol goes down. So I often say that when people have abnormal cholesterol levels, that it is a sunshine deficiency syndrome, and embrace that as a strategy to modify your lipids. I don't even like to say lower your cholesterol numbers down, but let's just say find the perfect cholesterol levels for each individual.
Modify, balance, individualize. Makes sense. I love that. Okay, what about
Yeah.
toxins? How do you like to best screen for toxins? Do you screen everybody for mycotoxins, environmental toxins, heavy metals, or do you pick depending on presentation and history?
Yeah, no, definitely. I check everybody for mold mycotoxins, and usually for the environmental toxins. If I had to pick one versus the other, it would be the mold mycotoxin. And the mold mycotoxin, I think, is a 21st century crisis. Although it was talked about in the Bible, talked about in the Old Testament, the book of Leviticus, about what to do when your home is moldy and how to break it down and how to make sure it was clean, because they knew the health ramifications of it, 3,000 years ago. And yet, most medical doctors don't have a clue about how dangerous mold is. And mold, essentially, I think, is the most dangerous of all toxins, because if you think about all the toxins, and people would say, well, wait a second, what about mercury? What about aluminum? What about lead? What about VOCs? What about pesticides? What about EMF? That's all bad. Those are all very bad things, especially in high levels. They're undoubtedly very bad. But lead in a pipe, or mercury in an amalgam, or even a vaccine, for that matter, um, mercury does not have the express intent of injuring. It doesn't have consciousness to say, I want to injure something. The asbestos in the ceiling is bad, but it doesn't have the intent of killing the inhabitant. Mold does. Mold does. Mold wants to survive. Mold has been on planet Earth for 750 million years, way before man was here. It knows how to survive. And one of the things it does to survive, it produces mycotoxins. And those mycotoxins get into not only the body of the human, but also of other animals. It also gets into bacteria, for example, and it kills bacteria. And you may know one of those mold mycotoxins as penicillin. You may know one of those mold mycotoxins as mycophenolic acid, which is an immunosuppressant that is used as a pharmaceutical in products like Cellcept, and others, that the purpose of it is to suppress the immune system in people who have autoimmune disease. Also, for example, organ transplant recipients. So if you're in my industry and somebody gets a new heart, well, that person who has the new heart takes a slurry of pharmaceuticals to shut down the immune system. So the person, the immune system, does not attack the new heart. And one of those, of course, is, like I said, mycophenolic acid, or what is known as CellCept. So with that in mind, it's very, very important to be able to determine if people are getting poisoned from these mycotoxins. And I think that that strategy is twofold. Number one, test the home in a variety of ways, and then also test the individual. And that's where the mycotoxin testing comes in. And Vibrant has the most complete lab testing in that arena, and that's what we use. And ultimately, as we find those mold mycotoxins, now we have to go back to the individual person and say, okay, well, let's where are you getting contaminated in your environment? Are they coming from food? Are they coming from the environment? And then once we identify that, to come up with different strategies to deal with it. But it's definitely a tough one. It's a lot easier to tell people, eat more seafood, get more sunshine, go to sleep a little bit earlier, take these 10 supplements, than it is to have people find the mold in their home, remediate them, that in the home. What about their belongings? Detox protocols.
Mm.
It's a lot. I know you're very familiar with that as well. It's a big conversation, but I guess at the end
Sure.
of the day, we can only offer the truth and give people uh, reasons, why they are sick, and explain mystery illnesses or common illnesses, and explain that in the light of mold, and then try our best to help people get through it all.
Right. And with mycotoxins, that's one area of environmental medicine. But generally, what's your favorite way to support healthy detox? Is glutathione enough? Do you like food based, maybe grass fed whey protein? This is one of my favorite ways of using food to stimulate natural glutathione production. How do you kind of tackle it in a general approach?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Right. So, the whole concept again of that eat well, live well, think well. So we're eating organic, Paleolithic or hunter gatherer food. So always eating organic. Hopefully everybody can agree with eating organic food, no matter where you fall, vegan, vegetarian, paleo, keto, carnivore, just get all the chemicals out of our food. Let's agree with that. Number two, wild seafood. Number 2A, free range grass fed meats, nose to tail. And that's, that could be liver, heart, and some of the other organs. The heart, or the liver, excuse me, is obviously the most nutrient dense thing in the world. All the vitamins, all the minerals, all the fats, all the proteins are in there. Maybe save, for the omega-3 fatty acids, EPA, DHA, that you can only get from seafood. So that would be a great start. Me personally, I always recommend people go gluten free. And that's pretty much what my stance is on that. And then as far as evidence-based supplements, I agree. New Zealand grass-fed whey protein, or a grass-fed whey, phenomenal source, and lots of data and literature on the benefits of whey regarding blood pressure reduction, lipid modification, and then also in detoxification, as it is a great precursor for glutathione. So I definitely agree with that. I think regarding a lot of these toxins and stuff like that too, is that we get into the binders, and what kind of binders can we use so we don't reabsorb all those toxins into the body. So, those binders, a lot of great natural solutions there, whether it's activated charcoal, it is zeolite products, it is bentonite clay, or it's just fiber compounds like organic psyllium husk or inulin. Some of the seeds, some of the, flax seeds and stuff like that, some of the seed meals can be good binders as well. So lots of different strategies for detox. And then again, yeah, you get into the
Yeah.
biohacking stuff, right? You talk about, what about sauna? What about light therapy? I think I think there's some phenomenal ways to do that, but ultimately we do have to get rid of the exposure. And yes, we could use air purification systems, but the main thing is to find the source of the mold and to either mitigate it, remediate, fix it, or get out of it. And I think in a lot of ways, it really depends on the stage the person is in. So for example, I saw this woman who came to see me a few months ago, and she's 36 years old. And she comes to see me because she thinks that she has myocarditis after her one and only COVID shot. And I'm taking the history on her, and she is very brain fogged. She has skin problems. She got the COVID shot because she had these health problems, and she was really concerned about her body's ability to handle, COVID.
Hmm.
And And then again, she's been suffering from heart palpitations and she thinks she's got myocarditis. And that's how she winds up in the office of a holistic cardiologist. And I said, I'm going to make this real quick. I'm going to cut to the chase on you real quick on this because you may or may not have myocarditis. And candidly, I don't really care. I don't really care if you do or don't from that. You're on a gazillion supplements, a gazillion products and stuff like that. You can't take anything. You can't swallow anything. You are like dying imminently. She's 36 years old.
Jeez.
And I said,
Mm.
tell me about your home that you live in. And she's like, okay, what do you want to know? And I said, what year was it built? And she's like, I think sometime in the late 1990s. I said, is it a home? Is it an apartment, condominium, townhouse? What is it? And she said, I am on the bottom floor of a 3-story, condominium. And I said, has there ever been any kind of water damage there? And she's like, yeah, we've had, a couple different floods from the unit above me came down into my place. I said, do you see any obvious mold? And she's like, well, I definitely see mold, in the shower. And I've noticed some stuff, around the kitchen sink. And I'm like, and actually, when she came to see me, she has no money. She has no money. And I said, how did you afford to get an appointment with me? How did you come up with that money to do so? And she said, someone on social media, on Facebook, I met, and she's paying for this consultation. And I
Wow.
said, here's what I'm going to do.
Wow.
I'm going to cut the consultation really short. I'm going to cut it really short because I don't need to ask you about anything else about nutrition or lifestyle or blah, blah, blah. I said, I want you to take the money that you were going to spend with me. And I got her sponsor on the phone and I said, here's what you guys need to do. You got to find a hotel. I want you to find a hotel that's been built in the last year. And here's what I want you to do. And to the woman, I want you to go to the hotel and I want you, before you enter the hotel room, I want you to strip naked in the hall. And then you're going to go into the room and you're going to shower. And there you can, order Instacart or DoorDash or whatever, or a friend can deliver brand new packaged clothing to you and you will start your life over. And when you feel up to it, then you can, go back into the home and, with full covering and a hazmat suit, should you choose to, again, with a respirator on and stuff, like fully covered, to go in there and get your belongings should you need to inspect those belongings, but you are contaminated. And we ultimately actually were able to run a mycotoxin test on her. She was sky high and Stachybotrys related mycotoxins. So just kind of proving my point. And she is slowly on the road to recovery. And, Dr. Emmy, to your point, yeah, I mean, again, like, gently putting her on kind of detox and binding products. But as you know, some of those people are so sensitive to everything. And I'll kind of credit Beth O'Hara, with who's well known in the mold space as well, with talking about, sprinkles and stuff like that of supplements, just starting with little teeny tiny amounts in these people. Cause I think all of us in our zealousness to kind of get people, as fast as possible, sometimes we go a little bit overboard, but yeah, I mean, again, just a great, a story about mold. And I think, and then let me tell you one more story too. I mean, cause I could tell you stories like this all day long, but there was a woman who consulted with me and she said, I have a history of atrial fibrillation. I'm not in it that often, but it started up full time with me back in September. And, like any good doctor, I try and take a history. And I'm like, well, and what happened before that? And she's like, well, we were gone all summer. We were traveling around and we were in our RV and checking out these national parks and doing our thing. And then we spent some time in Southern California. And then the day we got back to our house in Chicago, I went into atrial fibrillation. Okay, well, come on. What does that mean? Something is in that house. Something is in the house. And it could be EMF, like she's right next to a cell phone tower and that, played a factor. Or again, she may have asbestos in her ceilings or, whatever these toxins that are there are. But to me, the biggest smoking gun always is mold. And we tested her for mold mycotoxins and at her house tested, they all came back high. And, we have a reason why she went into atrial fibrillation. Now, what would go on with someone like that is that, again, she could either decide to do something about it. And there could be a lot of, limitations on that. What's her husband going to say? What are her children going to say? I mean, whatever it may be, these things that could impede her ability to do so. And I'm like, well, listen, I can only give you the information and tell you that that is what's happening to you. Um, again, stories like that all day long, and it just takes a good history. And I always ask everybody, how old is the home you live in? Has there ever been any history of water, damage, to it? And even if they were to say the house is brand new and there's never any history of water damage, I still check. Because we can still find things. Doesn't matter if your home is brand new. If your home was built out of wood and it ever rained on your home once, then your home could be contaminated with mold and it could be brand new.
It's so ubiquitous now.
Yeah.
It's really, screening everybody, I think, is becoming more and more common.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Those stories give me goosebumps. It makes my heart beat a little faster. It makes me grateful just to be in conversations like this.
Hopefully
So
it's not
thank
mold,
you. My
Jen.
gosh. Yeah. It has me
Well,
wondering.
I
Yeah,
think
right?
really is that I think everybody has to wonder.
Yeah.
Everybody has to
Hmm.
wonder, and we've all got a gazillion stories like this, and a lot of practitioners who may be listening, that for that patient who, you know, you told them everything and they followed everything, right?
Mm.
They they ate the foods and they lived the lifestyle, right? They were more active and they were more outdoors and they were going to sleep better and they were avoiding all these other toxins and trying to keep the toxin burden low. And they were taking their supplements and they did, a lot of the testing, and yet they still had a lot of inflammation or they still had a lot of symptoms.
Mm.
Mold helps to explain everything. It helps to explain every mental
Mm.
disorder, every physical disorder. And there is more and more literature that's coming out to support that. And I think it's very exciting, for that to happen, to be able to really show people the information. A real quick story. Let me tell you this one too. So a patient comes to see me.
Mhm.
He's 64 years old, and he's got cardiomyopathy. He's got ejection fraction 25%. He's got an implanted cardiac defibrillator. He's on 8 pharmaceuticals, and he also carried the diagnosis of sarcoidosis. So sarcoidosis is considered an inflammatory disorder of unknown cause, leading to what's called non-caseating granulomas, or these kind of like little inflammatory balls, if you will, little tiny things that are inside of, most commonly in the lungs, but could also impact the heart. So he's got cardiomyopathy, sarcoidosis. The cardiomyopathy presumably is from the sarcoidosis. He's on a slurry of meds. And I said, okay, listen, I'm not the worldwide leader, as far as sarcoidosis. I'm not the worldwide expert in sarcoidosis, but I'm considered, I believe I'm one of the worldwide leaders in causation. And let's test you for these various things. Check his mold panel, 2 mycotoxins, environmental toxins, come back sky high. One of which is
Mm.
Stachybotrys. The other was Fusarium. So these come back and they're back sky high. So trying to prove my point to this guy, because again, I'm going to try and get him off pharmaceuticals. He's under the care of the doctors at Mayo Clinic and UCLA. I mean, these are the smartest minds in the sickness industry today, the Mayo Clinic and UCLA. Smartest doctors out there, right? So I get on the internet. I become a Dr. Google at that moment. And I punch up sarcoidosis mold mycotoxins. You want some goosebumps, Jen? One study
I do.
comes
Bring it.
up from 2011, and the study is it's in the journal Environmental Health, 2011, and the title of the study is fungal exposure in homes of patients with sarcoidosis,
Mm.
2011. And I show this to
Wow.
the guy, and he's like, falls off his chair. The Mayo Clinic, UCLA, they've got no answers for this guy outside of, pharmaceuticals and immunosuppressants and stuff like that, because it is an immune, disease. And so what do we do, right? We test his home. He finds it in his home, remediates the home. And honest to God, we got him off 6 of those 8 pharmaceuticals. His heart function is totally
Wow.
normal. We're working on the final 2 pharmaceuticals, and he's just one of my biggest fans, him and his wife. And it's exciting. It's exciting to be able to provide these kind of answers to people who've just gone through life with no answers. And that could be for, again, for cancer, Parkinson's, neurologic disorders, cardiovascular. Think about this, Dr. Emmy. How many women are struggling with infertility?
Oh gosh.
Infertility.
Mm,
And how many of
Every
those
day I
women are
hear.
living in mold? So
mm.
there you go.
Yep.
Just fascinating, truly. Well, we obviously have a lot of providers listening today. Dr. Wolfson, you mentioned mycotoxins. Are there give us some other tools to put in their toolkit as far as do you have a set protocol that you run on pretty much any patient that walks in the door, or do you have like two or three tests that you would run just on about
Well, I
anybody?
call we have I've set up what's called level 1, 2, 3, and 4 testing. And level 2 testing is the one that we most commonly do, and that's a combination of 6 tests. One of which is what we would say are the triple toxin test, right? So that's the vibrance, mold mycotoxin test, environmental toxins, and for the toxic metals. The I run the wheat zoomer on everybody, and what's interesting is that right for the longest time we thought that gluten was the only offender, maybe some other bugs, and toxins and offender. Mold is a major offender to lead to leaky gut, intestinal hyperpermeability, and the stimulation of gluten antibodies, even though the person does not eat gluten. They could be from mold. So we test everybody for that.
Hmm.
And then we also do the vibrant micronutrient testing. So we're testing intracellular vitamins and minerals. One of my favorite things, again, and I call this like a drop the mic moment, especially for people with coronary artery disease, is that intracellular vitamin K2 level. If someone, a lot of them are taking K2, great. Is it getting into the cells? That's where the magic happens. It
Hmm.
happens inside of the cells. It doesn't matter if we're standing on the side of a river and the rivers and the boat down the center of the river's got our food and supplies. Doesn't do any good unless it docks. It doesn't matter what's floating around the blood; it's got to get in the cells. And Vibrant measures that intracellular, and I absolutely love, love that testing methodology. And then just those kind of what we would consider are the cardiovascular, cardiometabolic basics of the
Hmm.
Vibrant America panel, and looking at the advanced lipids that we talked about, looking at the markers of inflammation, looking at homocysteine and uric acid, looking at the advanced diabetes and metabolics and the fasting insulin and thyroid antibodies. Like all that stuff is all critical information, and they're not getting it from their mainstream medical doctors. So so we offer that as well. I do like gut testing. I like the gut zoomer. I like IBS. IBS sure testing. I like the neural zoomer. I like some of the other food zoomers. I guess I'd find a lot of times with food sensitivity in general that once we get them out of the mold, and once we definitively stop the gluten, and once we kind of clean up their environment and go organic, that a lot of those food sensitivities go by the wayside. So
Hmm.
you know I mean, you could test those things on people, but it never really sat well with me if someone came back and they're sensitive to salmon, or they're sensitive even to eggs. Like I always believed it was something else that was leading to that sensitivity. So if we get rid of the something else,
Hmm.
can we still enjoy all those
Right.
foods? And, listen, it does stack up very quickly as far as the expense of all these tests. And it's nice to know if they're
Hmm.
available. And I guess at the end of the day, too, is that if someone really cleans up all these various things, yet they're still
Hmm.
not exactly where they want to be or where we want them to be. So let's just say they don't feel great, or they feel still fatigued, or their testosterone is low, or they've got other markers of inflammation, and we want to dig a little bit deeper in the person who's definitively doing well. Well, then there may be a place for some of these other zoomers where like, okay, what about dairy? I want to consume dairy. I like raw dairy. I've even seen some medicinal benefits of dairy, right? Dr. Emmy and I, we talked about, whey protein, and there's literature about dairy, let alone the good organic raw, dairy. Can someone consume that? Well, there you could go into a dairy zoomer and see definitively, are there other issues, with that. But, again, I'm very grateful to Vibrant for having the whole, uh, you know, library of offerings. I think it becomes very, very comprehensive. But I would also encourage people to certainly stick with kind of like a handful of tests where they can be super strong in those tests.
Hmm.
And I think that they will help the vast, vast majority of people. But to kind of end this particular question, everybody has to be mold mycotoxin tested. everybody. It may
Mm,
be the single most informative thing that we should be checking.
mm.
Right. I like how you
That's
draw that
helpful.
line in the
Thank you.
sand. Oh, go ahead, Jen.
No, no, no. I was just, and I've actually taken a lot of vibrance tests, but not that one. So that's the next on my list.
Prioritize it.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Okay, so what about therapeutics, Dr. Wolfson? I think, we've really talked about the foundational thing, the diet, getting a solid diet down, focusing on ethically sourced meats and our fruits and veggies, our seeds and nuts, our sunshine, our sleep, of course, all those basic foundational things that are essential. So I'm guessing the answer to this question is no, but do you ever employ natural antihypertensives, for example, like raw wolfia or botanicals? Or do you, really work on the long game and say, if we get these foundations in place, we don't need to rely on a supplement because it still, even though it's natural, it's still drug like in its mechanism, right?
Yeah, most certainly. Specifically Raufuia. I mean, that was one of the first antihypertensives. It became the pharmaceutical reserpine, and reserpine had significant side effects. So I do think there is a time and a place for herbals and botanicals, and some other plant based medicine. But it is kind of a little bit further down the game now than even when I initially started in holistic practice, where I would reach for those a little bit earlier. Now, listen, I think if a person comes in, the blood pressure is 200 over 120, we have options. Fortunately, again, we can go into the pharmaceutical space. We can load them up with, and say, listen, eat well, live well, think well. We're going to do the testing. In the meantime, take the extra magnesium, take potassium, no downside to those. We can put them on nitric oxide boosters like beetroot powder or L-arginine, citrulline, taurine that also plug into the enzyme nitric oxide synthase to open up blood vessels. Grapeseed extract helps to prevent the breakdown of nitric oxide. So we can do those, a whole bunch of different strategies. CoQ10 lowers blood pressure down. Omega-3 fish oil studies, although I'm not a big proponent of fish oil. I'm more, telling people to eat fish. But that stuff does. Chiropractic, don't forget the chiropractic adjustment lowers blood pressure 17 over 10 in studies. So we utilize that as well. Uh, but again, there are some herbal combination products, and the Raufuias, the Arjunas, the world, and similar, to that can have blood pressure, lowering, effects. Berberine can help lower blood pressure as well. So there are some, friends we have in that space, and I think it's nice to have those at our disposal. Um, but yeah, I think it's more of, it's kind of like that whole idea of, kind of we do the basics and fundamentals in the beginning. We use some of the more common vitamin and mineral supplements, and a lot of times that could be organ based supplements, that we're using, more the food based supplement type of thing, and then starting to get into the strategies of biohacking, but then also getting into some of these other herbal remedies, and then saving the pharmaceuticals for that last bit.
Mm,
Right. There are so many modalities and strategies that we can employ, and being very judicious in how we use those and individualizing each case. I think that's what I'm all about. It sounds like that's what you do on a regular basis, so it makes sense. And we're wrapping it up here. I have one more question for you, Dr. Wilson. We talked about how to coach practitioners in terms of talking to their patients about holistic therapies. What do you say to practitioners who are apprehensive to adopt this more natural approach? Maybe they have gaps in their knowledge. Maybe they do want to get started. Where do you suggest that they start learning about natural heart health? Do you have a training course, or how do practitioners really start to learn and dive into this material?
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of online training programs, in-person programs, for people to do. I have a training program that I've done in the past, called Natural Heart Doctor Institute. So there are ways to do that, and ultimately we have to just go back to the reason why we became doctors. Why did we become healthcare practitioners? We did it to help people. And if you want to continue to be a glorified pharmacist and pill dispenser, then you can do so. If you want to get to the root cause of why people are sick, and you truly went into medicine to be able to help people and to help people live longer and better, again, with that vitality, clarity, longevity, if you did that for that purpose, then you have to adopt this methodology, because the other side's a failure. That's all there is to it. But again, what are we up against? We're up against, pharmaceutical industry, medical reimbursement, insurance companies. One of my best friends is the head of the cancer department at a major East Coast university. Like that's his job, is to study pharmaceuticals and dispense pharmaceuticals. So although he's heard me speak before and he's heard me talk, yeah, he really can't comprehend. He can't allow himself, as brilliant as he is, he can't allow himself to be influenced by my thought processes, because he perceives that as not good for his career. And
Mm.
it's sad. It's unfortunate that again, you try and open up people's eyes, but some people, again, for all those reasons, they just have to stay inside the matrix. But again, the truth will prevail. I'm very confident in that. For anyone who's listening to this right now, here's the most important thing you need to do. Start. Just start somewhere. Start talking to your patients about eat well, live well, think well. Uh, you don't have to order all the different vibrant tests. Order one of them. Order the mold panel. Order the environmental toxin panel if you want. Order the micronutrient panel. Order the weed zoomer. Order the gut
Sure.
panel. Become an expert in one, and then move on to others. And you will get there. You will get there very quickly. Again, the team at Vibrant are all fantastic, and there's a lot of different tools for us to be able to utilize to move forward. But if you want to help people, just start.
Great. Yeah, take baby steps. Never hurts to just pick up one test. It can seem overwhelming, but I like how you break it down. Eat well, live well, think well. Start there. With that, thank you so much, Dr. Wolfson, for joining us today. We touched on staggering rates of heart disease, how we can begin to shift the tides with natural and preventive therapies and avoidance of toxins, what kind of change we hope to see moving forward in terms of the clinical paradigm, prevention, and management of cardiovascular disease. Before we let you go, if you'd be so kind, we'd like to ask you 3 rapid fire questions to lighten the mood and give all the listeners a fun send off.
All right,
What do you say?
hit it.
Are you
I'm
are you
game.
game? All right. Here we go. Number 1. So in our house, Dr. Wolfson, we speak to our kids about the word fail, meaning first attempt in learning. In other words, failing is just part of the process to get us to our full potential. What is the best failure you've ever experienced?
I mean, the best failure I've ever experienced really is my entire medical career prior to meeting my wife in 2004. So that's certainly what that is. And again, I've got so many different failures, uh, uh, certainly in the medical realm. And again, to come out this other side is certainly much better. On a mountain bike side, I've failed at many mountain bike jumps with my 16-year-old and 11-year-old sons, as they push me to do things I've not done, but then I would later come back and accomplish those. And I've not broken anything yet. I've
There you
smashed my
go.
ribs a few times, but no breaks.
I love it. I love it. All right. You can choose one person, living or deceased, to go kayaking with. Who would it be and
Oh, my
why?
father, for sure. My father was a
Mm.
cardiologist. He was my mentor, and he was my one of my inspirations. Certainly, as I saw him get sick, he would eventually die at the age of 63 from a condition similar to Parkinson's called PSP, progressive supranuclear palsy. Mayo Clinic had no idea why. Then I meet this young 29-year-old chiropractor, and she tells me all the reasons why my father's sick and dying. And I was too late to save him. I'd love to be on the kayak when we were much younger, to be able to tell him about all the stuff that I know now. He was able to see a little bit of it um, at the end. And uh, sorry, and again, I wish I would have been able to tell him all these things that I know now. But yeah, Pop, if you're listening, I'd love to take a kayak ride with you.
Thank you so much for
Thank
sharing
you
that.
for being vulnerable.
Okay, I'm gonna lighten up this one. I'm gonna keep it really simple. Okay. Answer as you will, Dr. Wolfson. Sweet or salty? That's
Um,
all I'm gonna say.
Sweet.
Okay, perfect.
I love it. Well, Dr. Wolfson, again, we cannot thank you enough. Thank you for breaking us out of the medical matrix, and hopefully everyone that's listening, tell our listeners where they can find your book and where they can find
Yeah,
more
no,
of
fantastic.
you.
It goes to like that, sweet, salty thing. It's like everybody's got their addiction, right? And that's why you mentioned it. It's either sweet, therefore like ice cream or cookies or cupcakes, or it is salty and it could be pretzels, potato chips. And then the third one along those lines is alcohol. So those are all really just kind of carbolicious, type choices. And although
Carbolicious.
I'm not going to profess to be an alcohol addictions expert by any means whatsoever, but I do believe that a lot of alcoholism is a carbohydrate addiction. Again, some people are addicted to sugar,
Mm.
some are addicted to, French fries and potato chips, and some are addicted to alcohol. And I think it's along that same spectrum. If anybody wants a copy of my book, my book is from 2015, Tailored Cardiologist, Natural Way to Heart Health. I don't speak enough about mold in that book, and in a new book, I will be talking a lot more extensively about that. But again, free heart book for anybody who's interested. They can get a copy of the book for free. And my website, naturalheartdoctor.com. Got any questions? Certainly you can email me to that location. Any way that I can help people cardiovascular wise. We're going to be revitalizing the cardiovascular training program that we've done in the past. So again, if anyone's interested, they can also email regarding that. And, I guess if you're on my email list, you'll be, getting some notification of that. So thank you, ladies, so much. And everybody at Vibrant for having me on. It was a pleasure to speak to you both. And listen, cardiovascular disease, #1 killer worldwide, #1 killer worldwide. And it's obvious that the medical system is failing, and we're going to fix it.
Thank you so much for being here today. And remember, the key to longevity is knowledge. Keep learning, growing, and tuning into the Vibrant Wellness podcast to discover the latest insights and strategies for optimal health. Don't forget to leave us a review and subscribe so we can continue to pay it forward together. Join us again next week on the Vibrant Wellness podcast.